verse 19, I believe. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week. Wow, Scott's in my class now.
I'm waiting, yeah, for now.
See, I kind of expected to see more different faces tonight, but we didn't shuffle as many as people as I thought we would.
Somebody's car's getting towed out there.
Ha 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 ha! It worked. Boy, my brain, my cogs are turning trying to figure out whose car it is and what we're going to do if they are. I like that. He said somebody's car is getting towed. And then he said April Fools. Yeah. Anyway, that's the first time I've got today, so, and I'm not disappointed. Somebody want to read verses 19 through 21, please.
Hey, Blake, before we read that,
Yes, sir.
Barb said this and I forgot about it. I just saw it. The Junior Muncie, you remember Junior? Used to
Yeah.
go to church here. He died yesterday.
Oh no.
And he's 81. And it looks like they're doing stuff at Graveside services will be held Friday at Somerset South Cemetery. So he's a boat, Thomas.
Dylan Muncie is doing.
Yeah, Dylan's doing the,
He came here when he was a boy.
yeah, Dylan's doing the funeral.
Okay, good. I mean, good he's doing it, not good that he's doing a funeral.
Junior Muncie,
Okay.
Don's stepbrother.
Yeah, I said it to Rachel this morning, but I haven't heard back. She must be too sick to even text.
I don't know. Okay. Thank you, Troy. Now, since I've got settled back down again, somebody read 19 through 21, please.
To me then, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his will? But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God? Will the thing formed say to him, who formed it? Why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have power over the clay from the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor?
Okay. And again, I think we just, some of this section and also farther down, we got to remember and I know I bring this up every week, but he's writing this to the Jewish Romans, Jewish people living in Rome. They had been forced out of Rome for a period of time, and the Gentiles established congregations, and now the Jewish people are coming back in, and we typically call it Judaizing. They're trying to apply their old laws to the new law, and that's so. This is kind of addressing some of that, and we get into a little bit more down the verses here. And one of the things that is apparent to me with this study is how much Old Testament Paul is quoting in Romans. And again, that's for the Jewish people coming back into Rome would have knowledge of that, and that would be part of their heritage, part of their history, and that they would help them understand that what they're doing isn't right, and to get things straightened out. But and in this verse, I tell you, it gets a little bit of a challenge for me. Maybe some of you are smarter than I am. Maybe most of you are smarter than I am. Maybe all of you. But we go back to where we talked a little bit last week, and what we talked about this, the end of the verse. And the point is, at least my understanding, the point is God made us. Who are we to question how He made us or what He does? Or or what he expects of us. You know, it uses it in verse 21, the potter and the clay, and we talked about that a little bit last week. The potter takes the same lump of clay, and I'm picturing him on a spinning wheel, you know, and you're making it, shaping, and he can make something that has honor, I think it refers to here, and another one that has dishonor. And my thought is, you know, the one with honor might be a fancy vase that's you see on the Antique Roadshow, or maybe even a water vessel, you know, that you would drink water out of. And the one with dishonor is the chamber pot, that aren't not something you want to spend a lot of time with. And, you know, but that's the same lump of clay that he makes those two things out of. And who are we to question how he determines to do that? The potter, the pot that the potter makes doesn't get to determine what it is. The potter makes that. And sometimes that's a little bit hard to grasp, isn't it? So we need to accept who we are and not question why God did it so much. I've used the example, and I've dealing with different situations. Everybody has different talents. And sometimes we think we get jealous or we get down on ourselves sometimes when they don't have the same, I can't do the same thing somebody else does. And, you know, I can't do what they can do, and so I beat myself up over that. Or, you know, sometimes we tend to look down on somebody because they can't do what we can do. And I use the example, the talents. When the master was going out of town for a period of time, and he gave one person 5 talents, 1 2, and 1 1, I think it is. And the 5-talent person, you know, he puts the money to work and he makes 5 more talents before the master comes back. And the person with 2 talents, he puts the money to work, and he comes back and he has 2 more talents. And so and then the one with 1 talent was concerned, and he goes and buries his talent. He doesn't use it. He doesn't take advantage of having that. And so, you know, and talents, this is talking about his money. But I think it also can be applied to our talents, our skills, our abilities in life, that, you know, the master didn't expect the person that he gave 2 talents to accomplish the same thing that one he gave 5 talents to. And he didn't expect the one with 1 talent to accomplish what the one with 2 talents had. But he did expect the one with 1 talent to use his talent. And he didn't.
So, you know, every time I hear people refer to this passage, you know, they always say that it referred to money, and now in our, you know, environment, we refer to it as abilities. When did that switch?
Well, no, and it didn't switch. It can also be applied to our money.
A talent was a form of money.
Yes.
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 So,
Yeah. But no, and I'm not saying.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just like, you know, every time I've heard that story brought up, you know, there's always a comparison. It was money, you know, they talked about the amount of money that each one was given, but then it just automatically shifts to where, you know, now it's abilities. But
Well,
is it still abilities? I mean,
it's both. And he gave them, my understanding is, and Scott or whoever correct me, but he gave them talents, the money, based on their abilities. I'm sorry?
See, that was the moral of the parable, though, right? Was that we have to use what we have.
You have to use what we have. That's the moral of the parable. Whether that's money, whether that's talent, whatever it is, we are to use it. But also in some applications, it's the person had the ability. I don't even remember where that's at. Scott, are you checking for me?
Yes, Matthew 25:14. Starting verse 25, verse 15. One he gave 5 talents, another 2, and another 1.
Okay, it seemed to me like I'd read someplace that he gave, and maybe it was a different gospel, and I may be mistaken, But he gave the 5-talent man 5 talents because he thought he could handle 5 talents. And 2 talents and then 1 talent.
Yes, let me finish reading the verse.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're fine. So I stopped there. To each according to his own ability, and then he went on a journey. According to his
Okay, so he did give out those talents according to their ability. God gives us ability, and he expects us to use those. Your abilities aren't going to be the same as mine, and it's a good thing it's not. You know, we're like a body, and if all the body was an eye, where would the hearing be? And you know, and if all the body was a hand, how would we walk? You know, and there's parts of the body that are more honorable, that we consider them more honorable, and others that are not as honorable, but God switches that around. And he makes the parts that with less honor more honorable. So we're not expected, and I've dealt with some people in my life that, you know, they were beating themselves up because they couldn't do what everybody else could do, but they didn't have the ability, they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the talent to do that. And again, that applies both financially. I may not be able to give as much as some of you give. Go ahead.
So I think what you said, what's important to remember, the man with the 1, again, the problem was that he didn't.
That's right.
And that he buried it. And so that we're expected to do something, and we need to be cautious of not to become jealous or uncontent, or those things when we look at people with the 5 and the 2, and well, if I can't do that, then I'll just bury it. No, you still need to
That's right.
be the best toe that you can be. Be the best foot. Be the best hand. Be the best eye. Be what you are. But not everyone is going to be able to.
That's right. Well, and the other thing that these men did, the 2 and the 5 and the 2 talent person, they developed that. And I think sometimes we think, well, I'm not any good at that, so I'm never going to learn to do that. But that's the wrong attitude to have. We can improve our abilities. Anyway, Hannah, you had a thought.
So I looked up what a talent was because I always thought of it like being a very small amount of money. It is nearly 20 years worth of wages for a laborer. So
Oh my.
the amount that the guy was given was actually not a low amount. It was lower than the other 2.
Yeah.
6,000 denarii.
Yep.
Okay, 6,000, a denarii is a day's wages. And so 6,000 would be 10 years. It would be 20 years, yeah. That's a lot of money.
So I always think of him as not having as much money and not having been given as much of an opportunity, but obviously based on that.
Yeah. 20 years' wages is even with 20. If you want me to give me 20 years of your wages, 1 talent, I'll take it.
Yeah, so 20 years, 40 years, and 100 years.
That's right.
And so 20 years is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, but can you imagine the master? This is off. How much the master to be able to do that and still go away and trust them with it. I'm not trusting any of you with 20 years of my wages. No. Yeah, I guess I am letting the pension board, they're not 20 years of it, but part of 20 years of it.
Well, with knowing that, I guess I can kind of sympathize with the 1 talent guy. I mean, that's a lot to be responsible for, you know? So,
I know, I
yeah,
always
I'm
felt
not,
that way
I'm
about this
not
terrible,
gonna,
like-
I'm not gonna risk losing that. I'm gonna bury it. I'm gonna
Well,
play it safe.
but what the master came back and said, you should have at least deposited it with the bankers and drawn interest.
In the perspective of how much that actually
Oh,
is,
yeah.
it makes it more like, okay, that's a
Well,
really big deal.
and I've often wondered on that same parable, and we're off the subject a little bit, but that's all right. We're still covering the same information. What if the 1 talent, what if one of them invested and lost it all?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that guy played it safe and I.
But I, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, Mike chapter 3, verse 2, they would have been better off to have tried to use it and lost it than to not have tried at all. Does that make sense? I think they would have been held.
But it wasn't their money.
Doesn't make any difference. You're a banker. You dealt with people's money, other people's money all the time.
But that parable is God giving the talent.
That's right.
He's giving us that gift
To use. That's the point, is to use it.
to grow.
And not to just bury it. Yep. Okay. So we don't have the right to question that, why somebody else has got more talents than I do. God made that decision. Anyway. Rabbit holes.
Well, you know, and it's not related necessarily to activities in the church, but I've always told Lainey especially, that just seems to be where it comes up. I'm like, listen, some kids are just born with natural athletic ability, and some kids have to work hard at it, and you're gonna have to work hard at it.
Well,
And so I think it's along the same lines. Like some people are just, everybody's blessed in different ways.
that's right. And athletics is a good comparison. Didn't make any difference how hard I tried to wrestle, and I worked probably harder than most of the guys on the wrestling team. I didn't have enough natural talent to be good at it.
And when I was a runner, it didn't matter how hard I ran, I still gained legs.
Now my brother went to state in wrestling, so he was a lot better wrestler. But he worked hard at it too. But the other side of that is, and it applies to athletes, not much talent, working hard will accomplish a lot more than somebody that has talent and doesn't apply themselves, doesn't work at it. And the coaches will tell you, most coaches will tell you, they'd rather have a kid that doesn't have as much talent but is willing to work than one that has a lot of talent and isn't putting the effort into it. They're easier to coach, aren't they, Troy?
Yep.
They're willing to learn. And we need to be that way as Christians, is we need to be willing to use what we have and develop on that some, but not be envious or upset about not having what somebody else has. Okay. Verses 22 through 24 for now.
What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much longsuffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? And that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had prepared beforehand for glory, even as whom he called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles.
Okay, so here it's talking about this. This wasn't. They're coming back, and the Jews aren't like in the Gentiles. They're not. There's friction there. There's a problem there, and he's trying to fix it. It's not just for the Jews; it's also for the Gentiles. And he's going to go back here and quote scripture from Hosea, and then some other ones that talk about the prophecy that these others are going to be included. What's that?
I'm just having trouble enduring with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. That he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy. I'm just trying to
Well,
comprehend that.
and I struggle with that too. And I guess God works in mysterious ways. And we may not always understand why he's doing things the way he does it.
When he's talking about vessels, then he's talking about our bodies, our us, right?
Or us, yeah.
Our us.
Or us, yes.
But enduring, so he'll make the vessel of wrath prepared for destruction. That's him.
That sounds contradictory to what God's plan, what we picture God's plan is.
But he knows before they're even late. Yeah.
But we studied it back a few weeks ago. I don't remember how long ago, but that good all things work together to good to them that love the Lord. And sometimes there's some challenges in there. There's people we get in our lives, and why are they there? Why did God let this person exist? Why are they there? Why did God make this vessel to create problems for me? Well, me as a Christian, he sees the big picture, and we don't. And so we have to make that, assume that makes us a stronger person.
Well, he also gave all of us free will, and so.
That's right.
That person was given free will.
Yep.
Just the same as we were, and they're using their gift of free will differently.
Yeah, and Jason, there's some of this stuff that's really hard to put together.
We'll know in the end.
That's right. So ask that question when you get to heaven. So somebody said the other night, though, that we're not going to care when we get to heaven. But you know, God has purpose. It talked in the lesson, I think last week or the week before, how that in Pharaoh, when the Israelites were coming out of Israel or coming out of Egypt, that it talked about God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And I have trouble. Does that mean he took Pharaoh's free will away? No. But the other side of that is we believe that God can soften somebody's heart, don't we? So is it that big of a stretch to believe that God could harden somebody's heart to accomplish what he needs to accomplish? That's a little hard for me to comprehend, but
I think in context, when you read about Pharaoh, I think that doesn't come up at the beginning. But we see on his own accord, with his own free will, he chooses time and time again to disobey God, to not listen, to not trust, to do those things. And so it's evident he could send 100 plagues, and Pharaoh's still going to do the same thing.
yeah.
So then, hey, I gave you the opportunity to change, I chose, you didn't
Yep.
repent, and thus, now I'm getting involved. But you just take that one verse out of context, it does seem like, well, God's interfering.
Yeah. Well, the other place.
It is to show his glory as well. Pharaoh's heart beat.
That's right. It was for God's glory. That was the purpose. Well, the other places it talks about Judas at the Last Supper, that Satan entered him. And I don't think that God let Satan take away Judas's. It was Judas's choice to let Satan enter him, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's.
Judas had already been
It was already in the.
things that he shouldn't, like where he was the treasurer.
It was part of his. And I believe that God uses. I remember my kids were young, and even now to a certain extent, I knew how they were going to react to certain situations. And I took advantage of that. I knew Erin, when you were in a grocery store and Erin did something she wasn't supposed to do, you didn't speak harshly to her because she cried like you had beat her. Now, you could beat you could beat Kurt or Jesse, and you wouldn't get any reaction. And so you have to learn how to and you use their personalities, and I think God does that, and I think the Bible sometimes refers to it as hardening the heart or letting Satan come into them. But I don't think he's taking away their free will. And again, though, we can believe that God softens people's hearts, so why couldn't God harden somebody's hearts to accomplish what he needs to accomplish?
Well, also, I mean, we have to remember that, when we choose sin, God's going to let us live with our choices.
That's right.
So, it's kind of, when you do something bad the first time, it really hurts, but the more you do it, the less it hurts. And so after a while, you just don't have that same reaction. So that's what I picture when I think of hardening your heart. It's not, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Yep.
So, God lets us live with our choices.
Well, that's especially with young people. Sometimes if they think they've gotten away with something, then they're going to keep doing it
Yep.
and keep expanding more, going into the wrong way because they feel that they've gotten away with it and there's no punishment.
And there's things. It's a hard challenge for humans to understand. There's not big sins and little sins in God's mind. If you do contrary, it's all the same in his. Now, and I had a conversation with a guy a while back that got involved in some stuff, and I've asked for forgiveness. Why? But there's bigger consequences in this life to some sins than others, but there's not difference in consequences in eternal life between quote-unquote big sins and little sins. If I go out and murder somebody, well, that's a big sin, but that's not a bigger sin than lying in God's eyes. But the consequences of that sin, depending on what I lied about, would be significantly worse in the murder situation than in the lying situation. But that's our human sides. And I think you're right, though. Sometimes because we have little things, we let people get away with little things, and I got away with it, I got away with it, I got away with it, and I got away with it, and it keeps escalating. Okay, back to any more comments on that section. And I'll be honest with you, some of this is a struggle for me. I remember my dad saying, and some of you have heard me say this, my dad saying that Romans was probably the hardest book to study or teach of any book in the at least the New Testament. What's that?
That's why we're all here.
Yeah, well, I may not be doing a very good job of it.
We're all here to help each other.
Well, if you look back at the potter and the clay section, where they can take the same lump, and a potter can also, if he's made something and it hasn't been baked in the kiln or allowed to dry.
It hasn't cured, yeah.
And then it can be squashed up and remade.
That's right.
So if the person has started on the wrong path and they haven't hardened and so on, then the potter or God can remake it and turn it into something better.
That's an interesting comparison, because if they get that clay before it hardens, it's easy to remold it and fix it. But I suspect that if you wanted to work at it hard enough, if you had a clay pot out there that was broke and you wanted to work at it, you've done clay pottery. You have to add water to it, but it's a lot bigger process once it's been hardened, and that's the way with the human life too, isn't it? If that person, they're not that soft person anymore, they've been hardened, they've been in the kiln and they've hardened, they can still be ground back down and add water to it and start over again, but it's not near as easy as that one that when you're forming it and all of a sudden it falls over and you have to start over again. And add a little bit more, it's just a lot less process to do that. Well, that's true with human lives, isn't it? In our lives, we can start over at any point. It's just harder once we've hardened.
Well, just like if somebody has been living a sinful life and they repent and follow what God wants them to do, it's like the clay being reformed into a...
You got to add water.
What does the water represent in reshaping the life?
Well, I think baptism you can make draw the parallel with baptism, is that's where the old piece of pottery is destroyed, and you do go to baptism, and then you start rebuilding on the other side. I never had thought about that before until right now. But that's a pretty good parallel. But again, if a kid that's not raised right, they're a lot more malleable. I don't know if that's the right word. They're a lot easier to form, to change when they're still young. But when we get old, we've been training an old horse. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can't teach an old man new tricks, and you can't teach an old horse new tricks. It just, it's tougher. You can, but it takes a lot more effort. Okay. Any other comments along those lines? I really appreciate Charlotte, and that's I'm going to remember that one. That pottery goes farther than what we typically think about it. Somebody want to read Hosea there?
As he says also in Hosea, I will call them my people who were not my people, and her beloved was not beloved, who was not beloved. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. There they shall
Okay, and so he's quoting Hosea where he's prophesying in the future this is going to happen. The Jewish people were his people, but I will call them my people that were not my people. So that's opening it up to the Gentiles and all of us. And then her beloved, who was not her beloved. And then, the rest of it, what it says there. But, he's trying to get these Jewish people. This was being predicted back, and you're aware of this. This is part of your understanding. This is part of your teaching. Learning is that. Okay, go on and somebody want to read first Isaiah there, 27 through 28.
Isaiah cries out concerning Israel. Though the number of the sons of Israel be like the sand of the sea, it is the remnant that will be saved. For the Lord will execute his word on the earth thoroughly and quickly.
Okay. So the number of Israel, like the sands of the sea, the Israelites, but a small remnant of them are going to be saved. What is a remnant?
Small pieces left.
Yeah. We think of it in material. You can go into Joann's. Joann's not even around anymore. Hobby Lobby.
Hobby Lobby doesn't sell remnants.
Don't they? Okay.
They do some.
Oh, do they?
But anyway, I'm thinking of a place you can buy material. And you can get the small pieces pretty cheap. Because it's not big enough to... But so that it's a small section of the Israelite nation that is going to be saved. And this is stuff that these Israelites learned growing up. Go ahead.
You can also think of a remnant as you've got a full piece of material. You cut out the pieces that you need to make whatever you're making, and the remnant is the little scraps left.
And you keep those so when you wear out the knees of your pants, you can put that piece of that remnant in there.
Well, with my boys, when you made the pants, you doubled the knees when you were making.
Yeah. But so, that's, and so, this is things that it's helping us and putting this in perspective, who he's talking to makes a difference.
So, I think we could also refer to remnant as a fraction, not the whole body's going to be saved. It was a fraction of the people that were going to be
Right.
saved.
Okay, and Isaiah again, verse 29 there.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
You guys explain 28 for me still? For eating will finish the work and cut short and righteous. You will finish the work of people being saved? I don't understand that.
Well, I think I hadn't processed this till just now, but who got exposed? Who had the opportunity to become Christians first or be taught first? The Jews, the Israelites. And had they all accepted, so because they weren't accepting, at least this is my take on it, I may be totally off base. Because they weren't accepting, he moved on to the Gentiles. Does that make sense?
Which makes whoever believes righteous.
Mm-hmm.
So the finished work would be the righteous.
Yep. And I think the plan was,
Okay, it's cut it short and righteous. Yeah, okay. I like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
okay, I'm really glad I think pretty good on my feet because most of this I hadn't even considered when I was studying this. Okay.
29.
Yes, please.
And as Isaiah said before, unless the Lord of Sabaoth had led us to see, we would have become like Sodom, and we would have been made like Gomorrah.
So what was that seed he's talking about there? Come on, somebody help me. The gospel, Christ, that was kind of my thought process. If we hadn't had the guidance, and I'm looking at it as being the gospel, they would have been sinful as Sodom and Gomorrah. We look at how sinful Sodom and Gomorrah was.
They didn't have the gospel.
No, they didn't have it. This is the Old Testament with Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, you're saying at this time, Romans, they had Yeah, they would have had that. They would have had the knowledge of, they may not have had Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but the gospel was Christ's life. And so if it hadn't been for that, then you know, and we talked about big sins and little sins. Well, Sodom and Gomorrah, boy, they were doing the big sins. And, you know, but we wouldn't have been any better than them if we hadn't had the Christ and Christ in the gospel to learn from. Yes.
So Hosea talks about the people. He says, "The ones that weren't my people, I'm going to call them my people." He says that I'm going to bring these people in. Isaiah, the first section, talks about that I had a bunch of children, but not a lot of them weren't faithful, so it's just going to be a small remnant of these things. But then, and here, verse 29 talks about that seed. I don't know if that's the same, you know, seed compared to a tree that's small, that spared the, you know, because we had a teacher, because we had someone, that leader kept us from becoming
like Sodom and Gomorrah, yeah. Well, and I look at a seed, what does a seed do? It grows. And sometimes you have to plant that seed and then it grows, and the seed may seem insignificant at the time that we plant it. But when we're eating it a few months later on our dinner table, all of a sudden it's pretty significant. And I think that's kind of, what's that?
Seed has to die before it grows.
Yeah, well, so it's talking about Christ, because Christ had to die before it grew.
Well, and you can also think of the seed as the apostles and the people that learned from Jesus. When he was gone, then they were there to spread the word.
Well, and I think they're the sprouts. You know, Jesus was the seed and he died, but that seed grew. I mean, his word grew through the early disciples and apostles, and continues to grow.
Just like things can spread their own seed, whether you want them to or not. I have this one plant, yucca, that was by the pasture field fence, and now I look over and I've got about 25 or 30 of those plants growing over in the field.
Yep.
That I didn't want, I didn't plant there, but the plant themselves.
Not all seeds are good seeds. Anything else? Okay, we're going to try to get through the rest of this. Verses 30 through the end of the chapter, please.
What should we say then? Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained righteousness, namely the righteousness that comes from faith. But Israel, pursuing the law of righteousness, has not achieved the righteousness of the law. Why is that? Because they did not pursue it by faith, but as if they were by works. They stumbled over the stumbling stone.
Yes, please.
As it is written, look, I am putting a stone in Zion to stumble over and a rock to trip over. Yet the one who believes on him will not be put to shame.
Okay, and this is, he who did not pursue righteousness obtains righteousness. And at least in my mind, the Pharisees were very righteous, or their acts were very righteous, but they didn't have the right heart. And so they really didn't accomplish righteousness. They wanted to look righteous, but they really, and even the righteous, but through faith is how we get through that righteousness. That doesn't mean we still don't have to obey the laws, the rules, but our faith alone won't save us. Faith and works save us. So it takes both the faith and the works to work together. Is that making sense to anybody? It sounded good. It sounded good here. I'm not sure how it sounded when it came out. But I think the Israelites, and again talking, they went through the motions without having the motivation behind it, the right motivation behind it.
That's what he says. They were all concerned about the law, so they did the works of the law, and they even did those things
That's right.
God doesn't care what other people. Well, he does. Absolutely he does.
I've-
Why you do?
I give 1/10 of my spices, but I don't care about anybody else. That's being righteous without having faith or the right reason for doing it. And the stumbling stone, again, he's talking to the Roman or the Israelites. They were coming back into Rome, and they're trying to do things the old way and still follow Christ. And they just wasn't. And it's a stumbling. It's a trip over. I've heard people say stumbling stone. You can use there's a stone there. You can either trip over it, or you can use it to step up. And depending on where your faith is at and how much light you have, if it's dark, you'll trip over. If it's light, it may make you a step and get you up to the next, so you can climb higher. And it may be the same stone. Any other comments on that chapter? We'll start with chapter 10. I appreciate the help. I'll tell you, again, if you're coming in here thinking Mike's got it all figured out. What's that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Remind me, and we'll talk about that next week. I'm not either. I'm really glad I didn't have to give up this class right now. They originally planned on me trying to get through Romans in 1 quarter. No. And huh? Well, it's too important to try to rush through it. Yes, I am. Didn't sleep good last night.
Did Lonnie kick you?
Well, my snoring kept her awake, and then she would ground me about my snoring. I quit using my CPAP.
Why?
Because I quit coughing when I quit using my CPAP.
My CPAP caused me all kinds of gastrointestinal issues.
It was blowing snot down into my lungs. I'm convinced. And so,
You ever tried the mouth tape?
well, I breathe through my nose.
Oh, I breathe through my nose too. You mean you breathe through your mouth?
No, I breathe through my nose.
Breathe through their nose when they
That's where my snot is in my nose. Otherwise,
I breathe through my nose too, but sometimes at night my mouth will get open. When he's snoring, is his mouth open?
well, but I'm off. When I have the CPAP on, I don't snore.
Well, I guess that's what I mean. When you don't have it on and you're snoring, have you ever tried mouth tape?
No. Lonnie's thought about taping my mouth.
I'm serious though. And they make it like,
Well, my problem is with my allergies. I've got sinus drainage all the time.
yeah, me too.
And one of the things the APAP did for me was it kept that open because that pressure was blowing it down into my lungs. So my nose stayed clear, but it was plugging up my lungs.
You about took that home with you, didn't you?
We